Hey guys, Tim here, Big Dog Forge. Welcome back to the shop. It's good to see you again. This time around, we're going to take a page from a history book. Actually, it's a document that was written in 1824 by a captain who was in India, observing the individuals in India, the blacksmiths, making an imitation Damascus using the bands off of casks or barrels. What we're going to do is kind of recreate that as an experiment today, and we're going to follow some of the methods that they describe. I can't be 100% on that because, well, I'm not in 1824 and in India. So we'll do what we can, and we'll see what the result of that is. So stick with me, guys. Should be fun. Okay, guys, so we'll get into the description of what I'm doing here. After this, I am going to say a huge thank you and a shout out to Steve over at Green Beetle. Awesome knife maker, makes a lot of Damascus, a lot of experimental knives, things like that. I will put a link in the description below. He sent me some information in a document after he saw my Dirty Damascus video. By the way, if you haven't seen that video, it'd be a great place to start. I'll see if I can put a card up in the corner to that one. In any case, thanks, Steve. I really appreciate it. He sent this document to me that described the blacksmiths in India in 1824. The document was written by a captain there and comes from some archives in Britain. It's available online. In any case, it describes the blacksmiths in India creating a imitation Damascus using the bands off of barrels. And in doing my research, what I discovered is these would have been equivalent to a mild steel, if not just a wrought iron type of metal. But the key for them was rust. They would rust these things up as much as they could, and then they would layer them, much like I've done here. So what I'm doing here is a little experiment. I heated this in the forge to critical. I'm tapping it over to make sure that it is in fact mild steel of some sort, but you saw that black flake come off there. That's what the rust turns into when it's heated to that temperature. Okay, so for flux here, we're using a sand and borax mix. There were a lot of different types of flux described in this document, but it's the one thing that I have that's close to what they would have used. So that's what we're going to do. It was one of the options, and it seems to work okay. All right, so we've got our billet welded up. It seems to have welded. It seems to have taken, so rust didn't seem to be a factor. And what I'm doing is splitting it long way. We're going to bend it hot over on itself and turn that into a square. It'll end up being about 3/4 inch square to 1 inch square, somewhere in there. And then we're going to forge it back together and twist it. This is something that was described being done in this document. How it would have been folded over, formed into a square, twisted, and they would repeat that process many times. I'm only going to do it once. We're just interested in seeing what kind of a pattern and what this looks like to begin with. And I am really surprised that this thing welded up as well as it did with all of that rust on there, but like I said in my Dirty Damascus video, it's not always about cleaning. There you go. It is looking black, crusty, ugly. I think part of that's from the sand, and part of it's from the rust. Like he says, this is all an experiment. Don't really know what the chemical process is, other than I believe the rust is being turned into fire scale, which is typically, if you read the documents, would be a form of magnetite. But I don't really know the chemistry. One of you really smart guys out there probably does. All right, we're gonna get this in the fire and twist it a second time. And close that barn door so you can see us a little bit better. I'm messing with a wrench. I lost a bunch of heat the first go around. And we'll get this twisted pretty good. So a couple of folks asked me if they could see a little bit more of Scrappy and how the upper half worked, that kind of thing, the layout was. So I thought I'd give you this shot, and then very cinematically let it zoom in on the action. Yeah, cinematographer I ain't, but you know, I do what I can. So anyway, what we're going to do is forge this out into a flat billet. And we're going about, I think it's about 3/8 inches of an inch thick. And we're going to clean up both sides. Not going to do a whole bunch of cleanup. We just want to see what kind of a pattern there is. And then we'll end up cutting this in half and doing sort of a San Mai around some 1084 high carbon steel. So there's the pattern we've got so far. And we got a couple of divots in the edges. We'll get all that cleaned up before this is all over. Okay, this is our 1084. We're going to mark out a little chunk there that we can sandwich between these two halves. Alright, and we're doing this because it'll be fun to make a knife out of or something. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with this. Maybe I'll send it to one of my knife maker friends. I got lots of those. Somebody will do something with it, I'm sure. We'll figure it out. Nice. Alright, so we're going to forge weld this together. And again, at this point, I used just a little bit of straight borax on this simply because the pattern welding had been done with the rusty halves and all that stuff, and it had been described in the sword and knife making part of this document where they would use borax mixed with some cast iron powder in between the layers. I thought was interesting. We will get to that eventually in a future video. We're going to keep following this document and experimenting with the different things that they describe. This is just our first experiment. So, all right. And we'll clean up both sides. And the cool thing about this surface grinder, we took this all the way down to a 120 grit. I can flip it up on its side, put a couple of larger blocks on either side, and I can clean up the edges of these billets on this thing. That's what I like about that table. It adjusts down so far. Makes it so easy. So we end up with some nice, crisp, sharp, square corners, and we'll be able to etch this guy out and see what she looks like. There we go. All right, let's get into the office with this thing where there's a little different light and take a better look at it.
So this is what we came up with. Let's get it a little closer to the camera so you guys can see what's going on here. All right. Interesting. We're going to read through this document a little bit more and come up with a few more experiments. And you can see our 1084 in there. And this is probably going to turn into a knife or something. I don't know. I may send it to somebody. Got a lot of knife maker friends out there that are really good at that. And I can keep making Damascus. So we'll see. All right, guys. There you go. Thanks for dropping by Big Dog Forge. Really appreciate it. If you think about it, like, share, subscribe, because we're going to keep doing really cool stuff like this. So take care of yourselves. Be safe. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.